protest against what's being done to these detainees. And even decent people say that they can't get that worked up about it. I mean, these people are represented as the worst of the worst. So quite apart from the morality of the torture of prisoners in our custody, quite apart from the fact that the Constitution forbids cruel and unusual punishment, quite apart from the fact that it's against the law, U.S. law as well as international law. So why should we care that brown people with Muslim names are being tortured? We should care for our own sakes because of the record of history. When you look at Germany, you see this clear pattern. In 1930, 31, 32, torture was still illegal in Germany, but the SA, these informal paramilitary groups, would drag people out of halls like this one, if they asked a confrontational question, and take them to these makeshift torture cellars.
And one of the early parts of the Hitler regime was really to pick up people and put them into essentially concentration camps. And instead of calling that torture, which is what was going on, they called what they did to people enhanced interrogation techniques. That term is precisely the term that the United States government uses about the way it treats people at U.S. detention camps.
After the great wars of recent history, America established laws that protected the right of prisoners more and more securely. While Rumsfeld was pushing for these abusive interrogation methods for the military to use, the military felt honor-bound, and they were actually legally bound to obey the Geneva Conventions. And under the Geneva Conventions, torture can be used under absolutely no circumstances whatsoever.
If you look at it pragmatically, does torture work? Does it do what you want to do, which is to say, as in life? And the answer is no, it doesn't. Waterboarding is the same thing that Saddam Hussein did when he was head of Iraq. It basically didn't work, and it was illegal, and worse, it provided information that was completely wrong.
You know, even the justification for invading Iraq, for killing hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq, was based on a lie. It was based on a false confession obtained through torture. We use it as a justification to topple a regime, to invade a country, to kill hundreds of thousands of people.
This is not the last war that America is going to fight. What we do today is creating a precedent for how American prisoners of war who are not yet born will be treated in the future.
In 2006, Congress passed the appalling Military Commissions Act, which stripped detainees of many rights to a trial and allowed many kinds of brutality.
It expands the definition of an enemy combatant and gives the president the power to detain them indefinitely.
When Congress passed the Military Commissions Act, it was really a slap in the face of the founders, because they fought for any accused to have the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury.
This bill spells out specific, recognizable offenses that would be considered crimes in the handling of detainees.
So what the Military Commissions Act does is, in a stroke, it strips the detainees of the right to challenge their own detention and treatment, or even see the evidence against them.
If that person is going to be tried, they're not going to be tried in front of a regular court like we're familiar with, but in front of a special court called the Military Commission. They can be done in secrecy, evidence from torture can be used, at a death penalty. Essentially, a person could be tried and executed without anybody in this country knowing about him, and the whole thing could happen in an aircraft carrier.
The military tribunals are kangaroo courts, modeled after Stalin's show trials and Hitler's people's courts, where similarly the accused couldn't hear the evidence against them. In an open society of due process, right? That means that They have to be able to accuse you of something that you've done. In a closed society, your innocence doesn't protect you. Most chillingly, the Military Commissions Act expanded the definition of enemy combatant to include any innocent U.S. citizen. Right now, the President of the United States, any president to come, can say to any one of us sitting here, anyone out on the street, you're an enemy combatant. And because the President has said so, that makes you one. And they can't torture you yet, but they will make it difficult for you to talk to a lawyer, difficult for you to see your family, and psychiatrists know that prolonged isolation makes mentally healthy people insane. There's a point, and I know it, if I open the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, and I read that someone I identify with, a journalist, a commentator, has been named an enemy combatant and is in a 10 by 12 foot cell in a Navy brig, it's at that point I'm going to stop talking. That's my limit. Everyone has a limit. So that is why, apart from the ethics, apart from the morality, each of us should be appalled that the state is torturing detainees and prisoners in our names, even as we speak.
We have difficult work to do in Iraq.
We're doing important work there. We need protection for our diplomats.
The third thing a would-be dictator always does is to create a paramilitary force that is not directed by the people. Any suggestions? Blackwater. That's right. I mean, when I lie awake at night, out of all these things, this is the one that scares me most.
Hey, all these fuckers right here.
Blackwater is a paramilitary force headed by a guy, Eric Prince, with close ties to the White House. Eric Prince's family's wealth has contributed over $2.4 million to the Republican Party and its candidates.
Blackwater alone has secured more than $500 million in federal security contracts since the year 2000. Two-thirds of those contracts are what is known as no bids.
Who needs ammo?
Most Americans don't know that Blackwater contractors are hand-picked torturers and murderers from countries that torture and murder their own civilians.
Do you have any qualms about hiring people out of Chile to participate actively in this war?
I believe the persons of that country have a free right to contract.
Now, most of us know that Blackwater is operating pretty much outside the rule of law by design in Iraq, and we know they murdered 17 civilians in cold blood.
Having used security contractors in place of our soldiers and in a security capacity, we still haven't come down to the bottom line of how they will be held accountable.
You do admit that Blackwater personnel have shot and killed innocent civilians, don't you?
No, sir, I disagree with that. There could be ricochets, there are traffic accidents. Yes, this is war.
Can you tell me what was in